So now I've changed perspectives out here on the river, and we're going to experiment with the use of long exposures and ND filters a little bit further. So what I'm doing here is I've got this setup looking downriver, and I'm just going to look through here. What I'm doing is we have this neat light, this overcast light, but the clouds, I've just cut out of this one. Whereas before I was shooting kind of upriver and getting that perspective, now I'm just focusing on more of a micro area of the river coming down over here, the stream coming down in here, and thinking about it, you know, compositionally. I'm getting a good exposure with my water and my rocks about zone 6 at a 30th of a second. I'm at F13. And so let me go ahead and first of all, check my focus. When I'm doing things like this, I'm always gonna manual focus. I'll manual focus when I can with portraits as well, although as we all know, it doesn't always give us a viable option. Sometimes you just have to autofocus. Now I'm checking my depth of field. Everything's looking pretty good. I'm at about 24 millimeters on this one. And I've got my comp dialed in. I'm at a 30th of a second. I'm gonna go ahead and put on a 10-stop neutral density. So 1000x reduction in light. Again, I'm gonna use the doubles and halves principle on this. Now I could use my 0.9, which is 3 stops. I'm gonna use the 10 stop and get a nice long exposure on this water. So we're gonna have 30 seconds. Let's figure out what that is if we go 10 stops. 30 seconds, doubles and halves. So we're just gonna start halving, or in this case, doubling the length of the exposure till we get 10 stops. 30 seconds is our standard. Let's start working our way down. 15th, 8th, quarter. So 15th, 8th, quarter, there's 3 stops. 4 stops. 0.8, 5 stops. 1.3, 6 stops. 2.5, 7 stops. 5 seconds. 8 stops. 10 seconds, 9 stops. So 20 seconds is right about where we should be if I did my math right. And sometimes in a hurry like this, I don't. But let's run a 20-second exposure on this. So now we're gonna get this motion of the water. And this is the thing with NDs. When you're using a neutral density, when you're doing a long exposure, think about the surrounding areas. I've got trees kind of blowing in the gentle breeze here. I've got the water going down. So I've got this really beautiful scene here. And I'm gonna completely change it. Now, a half a second or a 1 second exposure, sure, we could change the scene there too, and it can be really cool. Sometimes I like to go out to a long exposure and then work back a little bit. Find out where that sweet spot is in the exposure to get something that's truly beautiful. Make sure I'm not sitting on any snakes here. Just saying. Okay, so this should come out in just a moment. We're developing it now in the dark room here. Okay, so, all right, now we've got some nice silkiness to the water. It's looking very nice. I like it. Okay. Now, something that we get, and a lot of times when I put a 10ND on most cameras, it's going to be so dark you can't see. This is a mirrorless, and it has a really good sensor on it, and so I can actually get a degree of preview coming back through here, even with the 10ND on. Now, that one's coming in a little dark, and usually I'll just do the math, the doubles and halves, and I kind of rushed it there. I may have been off by a stop when I just ran through that, but I'm gonna go and do a 30-second exposure of this exact same composition, because I want my water, the highlights of my water should be in the 6 to 7 range, the foliage should be in the 5 range, shadows down in the 3 zonal range. Okay, so we want the gamut. We want to cover the range and use the tonal range that we can capture in the image from dark to light, and that's where our contrast comes in. Now, what to use in terms of your neutral density filter? How much do you go? The question is, how long do you want your exposure to be? And a long exposure can be 1 second, or it can be 10 minutes, or it can be 2 hours. Now, most of the time when I'm doing long exposures, I'll pull out that 10x during the day. If it's the evening, I may use the 3 stop or a 4 stop or something like that. To do long exposures, you don't just want to shrink your aperture down to do a long exposure, because you'll actually start to lose quality. You want the sweet spot for your camera, for your aperture. You don't want to drive it too hard. That's where a neutral density filter is going to come in, because you can say, here's my composition. I want it to be at f11 because that's what I need for my depth of field. And then we can say, now let's use the ND to bring that light down so that we can get a proper exposure in this light and pull that long exposure off. I like what I'm seeing here. I'm going to bring my composition over just a little and just make a couple of minor adjustments to the composition. I'm keeping the stream over here in the left, as you'll see. And I'm just going to do one more, about a quarter of a stop lighter. I just put the ISO up to 125, maintaining 30 seconds with this ND filter because we're getting nice silkiness in the water. It's looking really pretty coming down the rocks. Now, a lot of times when you do a stream, you're looking upstream, and so this is different. We're kind of looking downstream with the water, which of course gives us a different perspective. This is what I love about image making. You can just try things. And when you're out in the wild, when you're trying things, we got a nice overcast day like this, we can work with this light. When you're trying things, adding length of exposure brings a whole new dimension. It's like a fourth dimension in to your image making, because you can change the way the world looks in so many ways by working with that exposure. And as you can see here, the water is very beautiful here. It's looking really nice because we're just getting that nice smooth water. Now you might ask, hey, what happens? Let's talk about the use of the ND filter. Do we really need 30 seconds? Let's put this one away and I'll pull out my 3-stop ND. I'm just gonna put it on because I can meter on a 3-stop, I can meter and get a proper preview of the image and everything right here with the filter on. There's no need to do any special calculations or anything like that. So let's make sure I dial it in just right. Now I'm metering kind of here on the grass, and I'm gonna put that right around zone 5, I think. And so I'm gonna put that at zone 5. That's gonna keep my water in the zone 6 to 7. Let's bump it up by a third. So now I'm at like a 1/6 of a second, right? I'm gonna dial my ISO back just a little bit. There we go. Put that grass right about 5 1/3. Okay, so now I got a 1/4 second here. Let's run that. It's neat, but it definitely doesn't have the silkiness, as you can see. Now, so we could tinker with this. We could adjust our apertures and our ISOs, but a lot of times if I'm working for a scene and I want that long exposure look, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get it into 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds, maybe even a little more depending on what look I'm wanting. Because while we do have a great image here, and let's kind of go over, one thing I always like to do is just to check my focus. What's happening now is that it's a long exposure, but it's short enough that nothing really rectifies. Meaning the branches waving are just a blur. They don't settle in a neutral spot, so to speak. Whereas if I do a 30-second exposure, the branches are moving a little bit, but they have their neutral position that's actually exposing more than the movement is. And so depending on how much wind we have, we get a very nice range of motion while still maintaining a good degree of detail. And so I'm actually gonna zoom in and check on my longer one here. And it really is looking very nice. But what I'm thinking I'm going to do now, I've got a nice composition here. I've got a nice scene. I always want to take home the best image I can. And that's what this has been all about. Now I'm going to pop this lens off. I got a 17-40 in here. It's a great versatile lens, but it's not as sharp as my 24mm tilt shift. 24mm is one of my favorite landscape focal lengths. Now, this is in its neutral position. Everything's good. I'm at 24 mils. What we're gonna do is I'm actually gonna make the same 30-second exposure with the ND. So I'm gonna grab our 10X once again, put that right on the front here, and we're gonna shoot for that 30-second exposure. But this time I'm gonna run an f/16, so I'm gonna bump my ISO up a little higher just to compensate, so I can maintain my foliage at around zone 5, okay? And I'm going to just make some minor adjustments here to try and make sure I've got that edge-to-edge sharpness. And let's just run that first 30 seconds and see how it looks. It's looking very nice. One thing I'll do in the field with an important shot is I'll take the time just to get in there and make sure that I'm getting sharpness where I need it. And the 30 seconds is giving me beautiful results because I'm getting lines from the from the foam in the water, you know, the rivulets going down, and just adding that sense of depth and dimension to this whole frame. It's really beautiful. I'm gonna check my histogram, and it's looking great. It's a fairly flat day, so we're getting some range, but it's not a terribly large amount of dynamic range that we're actually dealing with here. I think we got it. This is gonna be a neat little image. We'll see how it comes out in post, but I hope we've got something out of this in terms of analyzing the concepts of using long exposures and neutral density filters and things like that. They're a powerful tool that can really make our images come alive with creativity